adapting to an environment or solving a problem.
Yes, I
In
think
certain
that's
ways, right?
Yeah, it's a way of solving a recurring problem. You come over it again and again, and then pretty soon you're falling into that pattern.
Right. So a lot has been written about habit change. You know, you go to any bookstore, certainly in the airports, there's no shortage of self-help primers on how to change our behaviors, how to develop healthy, effective habits. Now you're kind of coming into this sphere with a little bit of a different perspective. So maybe it would make sense to kind of canvas conventional wisdom on habit change and perhaps your like different take on how we approach this.
Sure. So, I mean, I think there are a variety of little insights in the book that are maybe different or just a slightly different angle on the common takes, but I'll just go over some of the big ones real quick. So, there are many different fields I draw on for the book, and I think that I like to call myself idea agnostic, and what I mean is I don't really care where a good idea comes from as long as it's a good idea or practical or useful. So neuroscience, biology, psychology, and so on. But the most common area that people talk about habits in is psychology, and there are kind of two big movements or bodies of research that have happened over the last 100 years. The first was behavioral psychology, and so this started with classical conditioning like Pavlov's dogs and things like that. And then B.F. Skinner's work with kind of a cue, like a light would go on inside the little
Skinner
case,
box.
right? And then the rat would press a lever, and then they get a pellet, and so this kind of linking the pellet to the light. And so you have a cue, and then a response, and then a reward. And Skinner defined this as stimulus, response, reward. So once you start to link the cue to the reward, they realized they could shape pretty much any kind of action. And Duhigg's book, Power of Habit, kind of popularized this and brought it back into the modern spotlight, this idea of a cue, routine, and a reward. So that's the first kind of major area. The second is cognitive psychology, and this kind of took off in like the 50s and 60s and has continued into the modern day. But psychologists started playing with what Skinner put together and realized that, well, it wasn't just the cue and the reward that shaped people's behavior. Also, our thoughts and moods and emotions, our beliefs, kind of our internal states shape behavior too. And this was a question that I kind of had rolling around in my mind when I started working on Atomic Habits was, well, how come the same person will respond to the same cue in a different way at different times? You know, like if I walk into the kitchen and I see a plate of cookies, that's like a visual cue. And in one case, I might be like, oh, those look good, I should go eat them. But you can just as easily imagine a situation where I just finished eating dinner in the other room, and I walk in and I see a plate of cookies, and I'm like, oh, I'm stuffed, I don't want to eat anything. So what's going on there? The cue is the same, the reward is the same. Why aren't you taking the same action? And I think it's because of that internal process. You're interpreting the cue differently based on your current state. And so the model that I lay out in the book of the 4 different stages that a habit goes through, it tries to combine these 2 major fields. It includes the cue and the reward because those are important for shaping our behavior, but it also includes an additional stage about our interpretation of the reward because your internal moods and states and feelings can change, and as they do, your behavior does as well. And so I kind of wanted a model that I felt like encapsulated all of that. And that's one of the major differences.
Right, so you added 2 steps to this. Now it's cue, craving, response, and reward. Right? And so that allows you to kind of more deeply probe into that aspect of contextualizing these cues.
It actually brings up 2, I think, important things. So the first is the contextualizing the cue, which you just mentioned. It allows us to understand, well, like, why do cues get you to do anything? It's because of how you interpret them. If you believe the cue is attractive, then you take an action. The second thing that it does is it helps clarify what the reward is. Like, why is something rewarding? Why do you find it rewarding? And one of the reasons is because it satisfies the craving that preceded the action. So, one way to put this is that perceived value motivates you to act. Actual value motivates you to repeat. So, when you buy something on Amazon, you don't actually buy the product. Like you don't buy the book because you don't actually have it yet. what you buy is the image the product creates in your mind. You buy your expectation or the perceived value of the sales page. It's only after you get the book and you read it and you're like, oh, this is really good. That's when the actual value, it satisfies that craving you had before, and it reinforces, oh, hey, this was enjoyable, I should do it again next time. So you kind of have both of those on each side of the behavior.
Cravings generally derive from very primal, instinctual reptilian brain instincts that we have. I mean, typically, and these function on an unconscious level in almost everybody. I mean, when you're surfing Amazon and you hit buy on something, like you said, it's not necessarily driven by this interest in this product advancing you along your trajectory. It's probably more likely because you feel uncomfortable in that moment, and the dopamine rush of buying that thing will make you feel, will change your emotional state and give you some sense of comfort driven by your hormonal state, right? And this goes back, you talk about this in the book and in the writing that you do, like, we want people to love us, we want to be perceived well by others.
Good code is good, we don't touch that. But for everything else, there's Sentry. Whether you're a mobile, back-end, front-end, or any end developer, we'll show you the environment, device, OS, even the commit that introduced an error, down to the broken line of code. Yet the woes of a developer go far beyond when code is broken. It's also when code is slow. Detect endpoints, slow spans, and operations consuming the most time across your stack and keep everyone feeling not bad.
That's the language I enjoy. You may know me also as the author of Clean Code and a whole bunch of other books over the years.
It's almost never the first mistake that ruins you, but if you can never miss twice, mistakes are just going to blip on the radar.
James Clear is the author of the New York Times bestseller Atomic Habits.
His work has been used by the teams in the NFL, NBA, and Fortune 500 companies.
Within 3 months of writing there, it was pretty obvious that this was the best idea that I had had so far. When I started writing, even to this day, I still have never shared an article that I wrote on my personal Facebook page with like all the people who knew me from high school or college or things like that. I was worried about what they would think.
Sense of belonging was powerful.
I mean, we all want to belong. That's one of the deepest needs that we all have. A lot of the time, people choose to belong, to fit in, rather than choosing to like do the thing that they say they'd like to achieve. There are a lot of things in life that your family and your friends often want you to be safe, and you want to grow. It doesn't mean they don't love you or they don't want good things for you. It just is a difference in priorities. They want safety, you want growth. In a way, I almost feel like the bad days are more important than the good days.
If you want to be in that 1%, you can't do the same thing that 99% of other people are doing.
Every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you wish to become. No, doing one push-up does not transform your body, but it does cast a vote for the type of person that's what it is. Take a little bit of time to think about that. Who's the type of person that cast votes for?
Listen, I want to say a massive thank you to all of our new subscribers, but most people that watch this content on YouTube don't subscribe. I want to change that. They will subscribe.
So much, but talk ourselves out of so many opportunities, of so many achievements, attempts. In many ways, the hardest thing is not to keep winning, but to keep reaching, because you often talk yourself out of trying something else. So if you're not your own bottleneck, you're in a position to be to fulfill your potential. So those are the two things that struck me first.
Okay, so human beings first appeared on Earth around 2 million years ago. So why are we still talking ourselves out of things? Why are we still our own bottleneck? Why have we still not managed to get to this point where we fulfill our
self-awareness, competing priorities. I think all these things play a factor. Not being clear about what you're optimizing for. It's not that no one's out there trying to make a poor decision. Nobody's trying to waste their time or be ineffective. I think it's just that life is dynamic, and what we were previously optimizing for may not be what we should be optimizing for at the moment. Or maybe we've entered a new season of life and we're slow on the uptake. We're still inheriting the inertia or the old habits that we've been following, and we haven't upgraded or improved our strategies yet. Maybe what we really want is a little bit different than what is socially accepted or what we would be praised for or what the people around us want. And so we're forced into this tension between choosing what we feel like we want internally and what we feel like we'll be praised and supported for. And in many cases, the desire will overpower the desire to improve. And so this desire that we all have to bond and connect, to be part of a community, to fit in with our friends and family, sometimes that conflicts with fulfilling your potential or with achieving the greatest thing. And so it's really being forced into these trade-offs over and over again that makes it a continuous battle to try to return and refocus on what matters most to you or clarify what is important in this season so that you can recommit to those habits and maybe shape your environment or your social groups in a way that supports it rather than hinders it.
So if you're talking about removing ambiguity from our world, James, I think that's a really appropriate place to almost jump in with you, because your writing is brilliantly unambiguous. It's a great compliment that I was saying to Finn, our producer, before, that when you're reading your book, like what often occurs to me is that the biggest compliment I can pay is the ideas are very familiar, but the way you express them is really clear and unambiguous. So it's a long-winded question of asking, how do you remove ambiguity from your world to keep that clarity of intention and purpose behind what you do?
Yeah, thanks for saying that. That does mean a lot, and I think that is a really nice compliment because complexity often is just like kind of a mask or a disguise, and what we really want is actually pretty simple most of the time. But getting to the root of that, sifting away through all of the noise and finding the signal, takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. I don't know that I have this figured out any better than anyone else. I struggle with all the same things everybody else struggles with, and that's why I write about the topics to begin with. My publisher said to me when I was working on Atomic Habits, we write the books we need. And, I definitely felt that way. Do I procrastinate? Sure, all the time. Have I focused too much on the goal and not enough on the system? Yeah, absolutely. And so it's really, a lot of these messages are reminders to myself to refocus on the process or try to commit to building better habits, to get back on track quickly and not let one mistake become a dozen mistakes. So, I don't know that I have a good answer to how to live a life of clarity, but some of the things that I try to do include not doing too many things. So if you're optimizing for too many things at once, it's very hard to remain clear. You just have too many irons in the fire. There's too much going on. And so that is easy to do when you're choosing between a good use of time and a bad use of time. It becomes harder to do, and I think it becomes increasingly true as you get deeper and deeper into your career. It becomes harder to do when you're choosing between good uses of time and great uses of time. In a sense, the most dangerous things on your to-do list, the things that are most likely to remove clarity and cause confusion and introduce a sense of overwhelm, are items like 3 through 5 on your priority list, because you have a good story for why you're doing those things. That's why they're on the list to begin with. And smart people are so good at coming up with valid excuses or developing stories that sound really reasonable. So you'll look at that list and you'll be like, oh, well, I need to do this. This is number 3. I have it on the list for a reason. This is a good way to spend time. I'll be productive. But the truth is, items 3 through 5 are actually the great greatest distraction to doing items 1 and 2, because you can convince yourself that you're being productive while still avoiding the highest leverage work. So not taking on too many projects, I think, is a really crucial part of it. Obviously, there's sort of a connecting point there, like a pre-step, which is you need to know what you're optimizing for. You need to know what is the most important thing, and that requires a little bit of self-reflection. And then
Can I just dive in and ask you a little point on that, James? So, when we created High Performance, it was basically meant to be a podcast. It wasn't meant to be a podcast and a book and a live tour and corporate speaking and appearing on TV and radio shows and all of the other things that it's become, right? So, it's almost, procrastination is so easy now for us because there are so many things demanding our attention. So, I totally get what you're saying, and I mean, we've been recently writing a theatre show, and it's number 1 on the list, but it's number 3 in terms of the things I've been working on, because there are easier things just to move higher up the list. So I'm totally with you. My problem is the things I'm doing rather than what I should be doing. I feel I can't get rid of because they're coming our way without us asking for them, and I'm sure lots of our listeners will feel the same. What would you say to them?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think success has this quality where it tends to eat itself. You know, you do something well, and because of that, new opportunities come your way. And if you just think about, like, each day has a certain amount of surface area where you live those 24 hours and things happen. You know, somebody comes up to the door and they knock on it, or people send messages to your inbox, or you receive something in the mail. You know, it's very unlikely, if you keep living days, that you're not going to have distractions creep in. That's just kind of part of how the cycle of life works. And so you need to develop a system as that inbound increases for handling and filtering all of it. Sometimes it requires like a really extreme move. Like in my case, once the book took off, for the first couple of years of my life, or first business, I would answer every email that came in. Sometimes I was even sending emails. Like I was, you know, the email list for the first 10,000 subscribers, which was usually just, you know, 50 a day or something like that. I would send emails out and say, hey, thanks so much for signing up. Like, really excited to have you here. And then you get over 10,000, you can't do that anymore. So then you just respond to the inbound that comes in. And then you get over 100,000 or 500,000 or whatever it is, and then you can't respond to the inbound anymore. So now the whole inbox is just shut off. It's just on an autoresponder. And I don't love that solution, but I needed an extreme filter like that, because otherwise there was no time left to write the next book or to do the thing that got people to come in the first place. So you kind of have to be continually upgrading your filter for what you say no to. And that's a really hard thing to learn, because sometimes things that, like previously, you know, 2 years ago, this opportunity would have been the most exciting thing to come across your desk all week, and now you have to say no to it. And so it's difficult to kind of learn that. The second thing is...
So is it about placing a value then on the things that come in? Because as an optimist, I go at everything at 100% and think everything could be the next amazing opportunity. So is this about what's the value of that? You know, like I suppose my mind thinks, well, hey, sending an email to everyone could be the golden ticket that separates you from every other author, brand builder on the planet, you know.
Sometimes I think you can use price or money as a filter. So, for example, with speaking requests, you know, I get, obviously I can't do that many. So that is actually like a very weird part of my business, because we actually want 99% of requests to say no, just because I have time constraints. And so